welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So, you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. And screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. And of course, with the regulations for health reasons in the House, we have to respect those rules.
We're returning the study, of course, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022. The committee is resuming its study of the agriculture and agri-food supply chain. I would now like to welcome our witnesses on our first panel, and joining us by teleconference today, we have from the Canadian Produce Marketing Association, Guy Millette, who is the chair of the board of directors, and Ron Lemaire. Welcome to you both. To the National Farmers Union, Katie Ward, who serves as the president, avec l'Association de producteurs de produits du Québec.
With the Quebec Product Marketing Association, Catherine Leclerc, president, and also Mr. Bourgoin in the position of general manager.
Statements, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Millette to make the 5-minute opening remarks for the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. Over to you.
Real quick, I would like to introduce Ron to begin that introduction. He was the one supposed to start. Ron?
Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank all the committee members on behalf of the Canadian Produce Marketing Association for the opportunity to speak on the ongoing supply chain disruptions having a significant impact on the fresh fruit and vegetable industry, agri-food supply chain, and the Canadian economy. I'll start by saying the following. Many of the supply chain issues we're facing today existed before the pandemic and have been dramatically amplified and further complicated over the last 2 years. The committee's heard a lot about labor from earlier testimony, so we will not dive into this issue, only to say labor is undoubtedly a significant piece of the puzzle. In addition to our ongoing call for improved access to workers under SOP and the agriculture stream of the TFW program, CPMA is extremely supportive of the proposal and a co-signer proposal for an emergency foreign worker program as highlighted by Food and Beverage Canada and the Meat Council. Regarding our supply chain disruptions, our members are facing death by 1,000 cuts as a result of the layering disruptions, which my chair will touch on shortly. Supply chain issues impacting a fresh produce supply chain that deals in just-in-time delivery of highly perishable food means not only lost sales, but also product spoilage and food waste. There is no doubt that the ongoing supply chain disruptions are complex and interconnected, and so too are the solutions, requiring action across multiple federal ministries and departments, as well as collaboration with provincial, territorial, and local governments. Short-term and long-term plans need to be established to start the creation of a mechanism to prioritize the movement of perishable and essential goods in the event of disruptions as those we've experienced over the last 2 years. Additionally, there's a need for a centralized focus in the form of a supply chain commissioner, mandated and empowered to bring the necessary parties together to find a solution. We will be happy to discuss the recommendations that were provided to committee, but at this time, I'd like to hand it over to my chair, Guy Millette, as he can provide his perspective on the situation and real-life experiences. Guy.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à vous, Ron.
Thank you very much. Hello, Ron, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to be able to talk to you today. As president of our association, I'm well aware of the problems that affect our supply chain. As a wholesaler, my other hat that I wear, a Canadian importer and exporter that started activities from Montreal, I have to face these challenges on a day-to-day basis. Even before the Omicron wave, a survey conducted to members of our association last November showed that 92% of producers, 75% of wholesalers, and 100% of retailers faced a shortage of labor that was substantial. It's also important to underline that the shortage of labor in warehouses with particularly great concern, whereas the International Maritime Transportation Association is sending empty containers to Asia and Europe and declaring record profits is becoming a huge obstacle with the cost of that for Canadian exporters and importers over the last 2 years. The cost of shipping merchandise by truck also increased between 50 and 80%, and I choose my words carefully, at the country's borders, as well as within the country. Here are a few examples I can give you according to my own experience at Cochin La Rose. Between May 2021 and December 2021, for a volume of at least 400 trips completed per week, we noted an increase of at least $250,000 per week in transportation costs. It's quite an increase. We also noted substantial problems of access to the labor force and absenteeism, 15% shortage, which is well below the 20% shortage in our sector. We also see a reduction in the rate of absenteeism as we come out of the Omicron wave. We are also suffering from the impact of the availability of products. Problems of just-in-time delivery programs that took 10 years to put in place are hard pressed because of problems of logistics, lack of manpower, and there are shortages of stock here and there. And these problems continue to increase at the national and international scale because most of the countries are having problems of trucking and labor. And in the marine sector, there are also substantial problems loading and unloading, which cause problems in the integrated supply chain. All of these examples have an impact on the average cost of fresh fruits and vegetables. Mr. Millet, I'm sorry because your 5 minutes is finished. So we have to move on to the next witness. Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Ward, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm pleased to provide insights and recommendations from the National Farmers Union regarding agriculture and agri-food supply chain issues. We represent farmers who operate at all scales and types of farms across Canada. We've advocated for economic dignity, social justice, and ecological health for over 50 years. Today's topic is timely indeed, but the acute supply chain issues that we face now have roots going back decades. Canada has set ambitious goals to increase agricultural exports, and our reliance on imports has increased. Multinational companies pursue global sourcing and just-in-time delivery to minimize their costs. Our food and agriculture system has now become dependent on long, complicated supply chains with weak links creating vulnerabilities. We see ever greater concentration with fewer and larger companies controlling inputs, processing, transportation, financing, and distribution. When a small number of corporations dominate their sector, they're able to set prices to maximize their own profits at the expense of individual farmers, workers, small businesses, and consumers. A case in point is fertilizer. Companies charging exorbitant prices blame supply chain issues, and yet these same companies are making huge windfall profits. The NFU has asked this committee to investigate all the factors behind fertilizer prices, and we hope you will announce such a study very soon. As farmers, we are price takers. We have no say in the price of commodities we sell or the inputs we buy. In January, Statistics Canada reported that farm families continue to depend on off-farm sources for nearly 2/3 of their family's income. Furthermore, farm income includes program payment money, so income from the market averages less than 1/3 of farm family incomes. Farm families are subsidizing the system with their off-farm jobs. When agricultural supply chains break down, farmers bear the brunt of the costs. For rural people, of their work and the value of their crops and livestock disappear into bank accounts of distant multinational companies. It's not surprising that so many feel left behind. Increasing economic inequality leads to social instability and disempowerment. The climate crisis will also continue to disrupt production and infrastructure. 2021's prairie drought, BC, and Atlantic floods cannot be seen as outliers, but as signals that adaptation is no longer optional. Resolving supply chain vulnerabilities requires planning to prioritize resilience and stability instead of putting all our policy eggs in the export maximization basket. Going forward, agriculture policy should be designed to build in safety valves and surge capacity so that disruptions are manageable challenges instead of full-scale crises. We urge the committee to avoid the appeal of false solutions such as big data, automation, and artificial intelligence that would intensify inequality, reduce farmer autonomy, and create new risks. True solutions will rebalance power and bring greater fairness and equity into our food system, and will mitigate greenhouse gas emissions while implementing adaptation measures. The federal government can do this by providing the program, policy, and regulatory support needed to develop and sustain our domestic market, creating broader and more diverse supply networks while retaining more of our high-value food dollars within Canada. Whether the sector is beef, pork, or processing vegetables, concentration of infrastructure ownership means that the packers, processors, and retailers are benefiting regardless. But in all of these sectors, our past shows us that a different way of organizing our food system is both possible and desirable. Let's use the beef sector as an example. In 1988, there were 119 federally inspected beef packing plants in Canada. All were 100% Canadian owned, and the 4 largest beef plants killed 35% of Canada's cattle. Now just 2 companies slaughter over 95% of our cattle. They failed to prevent COVID outbreaks and deaths, and cattle prices are low, while grocery beef prices are skyrocketing. More smaller abattoirs located throughout Canada, available to serve producers in every region, coupled with regenerative practices, would provide food system resilience and rural jobs, as well as climate mitigation and adaptation benefits. Banning captive supply and legislating caps on packing plant revenues would stop companies like JBS and Cargill from taking unfair advantage of farmers and consumers. By learning from history and envisioning a more equitable and climate-friendly future, the federal government can create a better framework for rural jobs, infrastructure to serve farmers, and farm prices that reflect the cost of production to bring prosperity and stability to Canada's rural communities and agriculture sector. I believe my time has nearly run out, so I thank you very much for your attention today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ward, and yes, you were right on time, so thank you for that. Maintenant...
And now Ms. Lefebvre, for 5 minutes, please. Yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen, members. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Catherine Lefebvre, president of the Quebec Produce Growers Association. I have our executive director, Mr. Patrice Léger-Bourgoin, with me today. These issues that we're concerned about today for our economic sector are availability and cost of inputs, a continuous concern, particularly in a context where production costs are not accompanied by a similar increase in sale prices. In addition, Market Watch asserted at the end of January that in spite of the increase in retail prices of foods, a number of agriculture groups note that stagnation of on-farm prices together with the rising costs of fuel and fertilizer cause them huge problems. The globalization of markets have negative effects, and the fruit and vegetables that are from local areas compete with the ones brought in from out the side of the country where the labor costs are much lower. So the selling prices, however, are very similar. So the nature of our industry is such that producers have no influence over the cost at which their products are sold. Most have a very short shelf life. Once they've been harvested, they have to be transported and sold quickly. This places the producers at a considerable disadvantage compared to the buyers. Also, a number of inputs such as fertilizer, pesticides, seed, and other essential products such as cardboard or cartons, pallets, and handling are also affected by price increases. And on the other hand, we cannot affect the prices of our vegetables. These rising prices have caused a number of countries to reduce their production, for example, in China and a number of European countries, including Russia. It goes without saying that producer countries will prefer the domestic market before the export. Canada is thus at the mercy of the international market. That being said, the cost of fertilizers will likely remain high. Farm Finance in Canada estimates that the price of will increase by 60% in 2022, and pesticides and seed have also increased a lot. In addition to that, there is the transportation and logistics. The cost and capacity has been reduced. Delivery times are increasing, and there are problems of spare parts which are paralyzing the transportation fleet right now. It is not rare to see a producer paying 42% more than a few months ago to ship the fruit. The situation is very difficult for us to deal with. We need these trucks, and at the same time, those costs are directly added to our production costs, which are rising tremendously in all sides. Also, there are fewer local workers to fulfill the needs. Relying on a high-quality foreign labor force for a number of decades, now, unfortunately, the pandemic has resulted in a number of restrictions which have slowed down the immigration process. Also, recent changes made by Service Canada caused the rating of temporary foreign workers from the agricultural sector by manufacturers and construction. Also, labor costs are substantial issues. In Quebec, the minimum wage went up 14% since 2020. Market garden producers have to absorb this increase without being able to pass it on in the selling price. We think that the federal government should continue its process to create a supply chain working group. Their capacity to produce, transport, and distribute the products is affected. The appointment by the Government of Canada of a commissioner for the supply chain to direct a joint working group would be useful to deal with this reflection process. Concerning labor, it's important to improve the program so that administrative processes are more efficient and foreseeable. In this sense, a foreign worker who always came back to the same place for a number of years, and there's an employer who knows about their record, they should have an acceleration of the process. Also, the stagnant prices of selling is one of the major issues with all the increase in our production costs, so we need emergency assistance that should be put forward to ensure the country's food security. In conclusion, our production sector has been operating in an open global market that requires us to be competitive with countries whose labor costs and regulatory frameworks are much less costly to apply. We have very little influence on the selling prices. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you, Ms. Lefebvre. Very well, thank you very much. So first of all, we have Mr. Barlow for 6 minutes. Oh, perhaps Mr. App. Okay, Mr. App, go ahead. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to thank the witnesses for their excellent testimony and also for materials provided ahead. I'd like to begin with the Canadian Produce Marketers Association. Very interested in your support for the Supply Chain Commissioner taking a whole-of-government approach to tackle some of these issues. I'm very familiar with the dynamics of a problem that crosses jurisdictions and departments and ministries, having dealt with temporary foreign workers in my own riding, with the intersection of COVID, with illegal workforces, bunkhouses, etc. So those dynamics I'm very familiar. It reminds me actually of my own household from a decade ago as a father of 4 daughters. Saturday morning chore time, I always had 5, Alyssa, Karina, Brenna, Kiana, and not me, and it was always not me's job to take out the garbage. And so, if I can start with, on a lighter note, but this isn't light, can you provide some specific examples as to issues that have either been punted from department to department, or where issues that have fallen through the cracks, or where a siloed approach has not been efficient in addressing the issue?
So maybe, thank you for the question. Maybe I'll start and I'll see if Guy has any comments to add. And I think you need to start looking at this in a model where we see agriculture playing a significant role in Agriculture Canada and our supply chain of being an economic engine for Canada. Based on that, we start looking across multiple jurisdictions. The first jurisdiction is, as was noted by one of the witnesses, on access to labor, especially on farm, and the challenges around, while improving, the process, lining that to making sure it's effective. Greenhouse is a perfect example from your riding. They are the tip of the sword in production, and they are one of the first to come in full steam relative to domestic production in Canada. And while they've identified that it's been moving better than what they've experienced in the past, there have been still some challenges on delays with last-minute switches to paperwork due to worker changes in the pipeline. But overall, they're 3,200 workers are on farm now, and they have another 4,000, 4,500 coming in for peak in June. So when you start looking at that division, you have to look at the divisions between labor, then you have to look at the other components around the simplicity of transport. So your Ministry of Transportation, you start looking at the division of labor, you start looking at the municipal division and jurisdictions around health and the power of the municipal health department. So as we start migrating forward and under a supply chain commissioner model in the simplistic way, starting to say, all right, how do we streamline? First piece is looking at reopening Canada as one piece of the puzzle. What are the strategic
Thank you,
moves?
Mr. Lemaire. I do want to pick up exactly on something you identified there with labor shortages. I'm aware that you're supporting, or your organization supported the emergency worker program. We've read all 5 components of that into the record in the last meetings. I know from the processing meatpacking sector, we've heard that the raising of the cap is primary. 2 questions for you. What issue would be primary from your perspective of those 5 pillars? Yep. Secondly, are you making out any progress? Are you meeting with officials? I understand you had some meetings last night. Can you update this committee on the progress you're making?
Right. So maybe I'll start with the progress. So Minister Bibeau has been very responsive to our request, the 11 organizations that have signed the proposal. And it's our understanding that conversations on the proposal are underway. However, as industry, we're looking for some indication from Ministers Qualtrough and Fraser that our proposal is being considered for action and for implementation in the immediate future. This is again that jurisdictional challenge. Even after 2 months, we've yet to receive a definite response on the proposal. We are requesting that Minister Qualtrough and Fraser sit down with our associations to discuss the proposal and to immediately look at the measures that can be taken to address the labor risk within that component of our supply chain. So although the food and beverage processing side of the business is only one of several sectors that are undergoing labor shortages, the government has identified our sector, which includes that component, as part of Canada's critical infrastructure during the pandemic. So the inability to meet those labor needs, as we heard on the meat side and some of the other pieces, is affecting.
Thank you. I do want to get in another question yet. Specifically on your call for investments in infrastructure, port, containers, shipping delays, et cetera. I know we're short of infrastructure in the greenhouse sector in my own area with sewer capacity and things like that. Where else in Canada, or are those the main areas of ports, facilities to address shipping costs and other infrastructure for greenhouse growth?
So for greenhouse growth to the U.S., it's fundamental. They're our biggest trading partner. 80% of the product out of Ontario, as an example, goes to the U.S. So we need to look at in a few key areas. Going south, we need to ensure that we have access to the main means of transportation, and that is our trucking industry. So it's not a federal rule, but we need to look at how we can support the provinces driving access to more truckers through licensing, the insurance schemes, and some other strategies around bringing more truckers to market. On the port side, looking at specifically around the issue of moving containers. So moving containers off the port so that they can move to distribution centers off the main hub so that they can be addressed, they can moved out of the system and into the market as quickly as possible, but then back into the system to be loaded with product to leave the country.
Thank you, Mr. Lemaire. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Epp. We're going to move to Mr. Lewis for 6 minutes now. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here, and also thank everyone in their industries, the amazing people who continue to work every day to find those solutions to make sure that we have access to safe and healthy products. I would like to start actually where my colleague left off with the Canada Produce Marketing Association. I was actually talking about, you had mentioned in your opening statement, layered disruptions. And crippling port congestion, costs of shipping containers, inconsistent product delivery, labor shortages, which we've already delved into, input shortages, and stockpiling of consumer goods were the major ones. I wanted to continue with the port congestion ones, that ships waiting to dock and unload, especially with perishable products. There's that could be leading to food loss, food waste, sales. What processes could be implemented to prioritize movement of perishable goods or essential goods as far as to mitigate the congestion and the food waste?
So I'll quickly talk to, I mentioned the points earlier around creating that secondary hub outside of the main port to be able to move identified perishable items. On top of that, having the resources on port so that if it's CFIA or if it's border services, that they can review and identify the product coming through, and the inspections can happen in a timely manner to get the product moving into the system. On the other side of that, it's also working with the municipalities, working with the unions such as the longshoremen, but also enacting the appropriate regulatory model that takes fresh produce as essential, so that in the event of any further disruptions, that the labor is there to move the product through the port. That's the fundamental principle. And there are examples of similar approaches to this already in existence. And we're looking for a similar approach for produce, and that if held at the port during a disruption, that the longshoremen and others within the system are able to take the product and move it out to trucks. I'll hand it over to Guy if he has any other comments.
Real quick, one of the issue that the major container companies, they're worldwide companies, they're not here in Canada, and right now they're not been accounted for all their actions. And within some of them is the price fluctuation of the containers. We got absolutely no control with price that more than doubled and tripled on that. And these companies are outside this country. Not only that, is they send letter to receivers of fresh produce container stating that they're no longer be responsible for delay in transit. So you cannot even have a recourse because they took 60 days to deliver your bananas instead of 21, even if the cargo is a total waste.
On top of that, the fees themselves are a challenge.
Which actually was my next question, so I'll duck out and let you continue to say that, because it was that exponential growth of the container costs. We've heard that price fluctuation, including refrigerated containers, and that's obviously creating these challenges. Can you help about maybe some best practices that we can have if you've seen that otherwise, or can you say when that letter that you're referring to, when did that start, and how can we put that into the record?
As soon as the container companies have seen some disruptions in the transportation port around the world, they knew that they were not in control of the transit time anymore. So we go back at the beginning of the pandemic. We go back maybe about a year and a half. And as I said, every receiver that do a lot of volumes on container were advised not to present any claim based on transit time. And this is still ongoing today. And I don't know when that's going to finish. We hope they're going to retrieve this rule very soon, because it's a struggle. We can count our losses in hundreds of thousands.
I feel for you there. Are there any best practices that we can see elsewhere in the world? Sometimes we can learn lessons from how other countries are working, and any solutions you can surmise.
Ron?
So we're actually part of a global supply chain group that is looking at this. It's representative of multiple associations, multiple countries, and we're beginning to look at some of these best practices. The U.S. have started; they're a bit ahead of us relative to that supply chain desire position and targeting and requiring ports to implement key strategies to move perishable product through to the external hubs off port, so that trucks have quicker access to be able to put the product to market. Also ensuring that the ships that are arriving, they're not leaving empty. This is part of the need that we have to start driving towards. How are we managing those ships coming into port so that they are not, dead weight going back to China or other markets, but actually taking Canadian goods with them to create that reciprocal trade model? Part of that is speed at port. So we're beginning that process of doing the analysis. We hope we'll have information to report on in the coming months.
Thank you very much. I have less than a minute left, but I wanted to check with Ms. Ward. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to confirm that you said 66% of farm family incomes were from off-farm jobs. Can you confirm that? Because farmers, we always think of them as farming for 100% of the time, and then having the ability to have a job that has income security.
I am happy to provide the link in our submission to the committee. It's from Statistics Canada as of January, was just published.
Okay,
and so
thank you.
that 1/3 that's remaining is includes program payments.
Okay. Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ward and Mr. Lewis. And now, Mr. Parent, you have 6 minutes. Please go ahead. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to all the witnesses for being with us this afternoon. Perhaps I'll begin with Ms. Lefebvre. Your statement, you raised a number of points that interest me, particularly on prices. The price that you receive for your fruits and vegetables that are fresh compared to the price at which they're sold in the market. Costs are going up, your prices are not going up. How come? What's the problem? Well, we compete against international markets. So if I talk about the situation right now, there are vegetables coming in from Mexico that come in at the same time as we still have vegetables in Quebec. So the cost of labor in Mexico, it's about $80 to $120 a week, whereas for some hours it's $700 or $800 a week for those wages. So we can see what the comparison is. There's a lack of understanding when we talk about the price of containers to figure out how they're able to export this far and have their products less expensive than ours, but I haven't found the answer yet. Okay, and what can we do to assist you in that regard? Is it something to do with reciprocity of standards, perhaps? Already standards, reciprocity, there are two completely different margins when we look at our neighboring countries or the countries that produce the same vegetables that we do. Of course, if we want to talk about Mexico or Guatemala, whether it's the on-farm cleanliness or other issues, it's two different worlds. Reciprocity is important, but we'll have to do something to deal with costs, the prices at which we can sell in order to be able to compete against those people. When we say that right now, for example, a certain amount of peppers coming in from Mexico for $10 and people producing in Florida, they can't sell theirs for $15. There's a phenomenon that is difficult to understand. We're not even talking about green peppers that they try to sell even at a higher price than that. It's a lack of understanding. So it's a huge problem because we want to put a lot of emphasis on local foods and food autonomy. So with regard to transportation, I'm concerned about that. You're paying 42% more for transportation, as you said, and you cannot sell your merchandise at a higher price, so you'll disappear from the market. Right now, with our root vegetables in Quebec, we're losing orders. Right now, I've had 2 orders canceled for this weekend that were going to be exported just from my own farm. It's really crazy, the price differentials. Normally, the exchange rate helps us out a little, but our exchange rate is not all that different right now. So compared to the cost of transportation, our labor costs, and all the other costs that are going to be added in 2022, because right now we're not able to be competitive. So I can hardly imagine 2022 with the input costs coming. Okay, and government measures that could support you concretely. Perhaps a code of conduct could help you. A code of conduct, yes, for sure. We need that. But at the same time, we're going to have to bring in some programs to support farmers. We want to feed people, but we don't want to feed them at a loss because it's our farms that we're losing in many cases. These farms will not be able to get through. Okay, so I see 2 aspects. Requiring the same thing from what comes in from outside the country, if we talk about carbon taxes or whatever environmental standards, and then perhaps some direct support. Yes, if understood. Yes, we can go beyond that. In all the different standards that are being added all the time, every day, week, or month, we have new committees coming out with new standards being added on. Okay, well, I wouldn't want to spend too much time on this without talking about labor. There's a huge problem with temporary foreign workers. You often have almost panic with some of the deadlines or delays. What are the problems? Do you have what if you had something to propose? What could we change for the temporary foreign workers? Briefly, what do we need to change for The impeccable employers, they have to have predetermined 3-year contracts. It's quite simple. Right now, an application normally takes 20 weeks to be processed, and right now Service Canada is still handling applications manually, so it takes 12 to 15 weeks to process. So there's no time left for the foreign countries to get ready and prepare our workers, so our workers don't arrive at the right dates. We've had the same thing for 3 years. It's not just this year. Over the past 3 years, we've been wondering if we're going to have our temporary foreign workers coming in on time. So it's a huge issue of delays. I think we could deal with that easily. Perhaps deal with it by site also. You talked about raiding in your comments. This is something I've looked into, and when I ask questions of the government, I say it's not true, check the site. You can't, but you have that problem. Could you explain that briefly? Patrice, would you like to complete that? Sure, and you can add something, Catherine, but what we note is that with regard to the changes connected to COVID, Service Canada has brought back in a process to try to speed up the application process. However, that way of proceeding was understood for people from other sectors not connected with agriculture, and they brought in a system for facilitating raiding of employees who are coming in to Canada for the agricultural sector. So, Mr. Perron, the situation is that the market garden sector will pay for the whole administrative process and will pay for the plane tickets. Then the foreign worker will arrive in Canada, and then a few days later he'll be raided to go and work in the manufacturing or construction sector, for example, without having to pay for those costs for bringing the workers in. I'm very sorry, ma'am. Ms. Lefebvre, Mr. Bourgoin, the 6 minutes is finished, Mr. Perron. But now, Mr. McGregor, for 6 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. From the National Farmers Union. I think you made it quite clear in your opening comments that these supply chain issues cannot be looked at in a silo apart from the ongoing climate crisis. And in my home province of British Columbia, what we saw last year, transitioning from brutal wildfires and in the space of 3 months, transitioning to some of the worst flooding we've ever seen, which effectively isolated Vancouver and its port from the rest of the country for a fair amount of time. So with that, and of course we've seen disastrous droughts in the prairies and just the incredible impacts they've had on farmers and supply chains there. I guess my question to you, and maybe invite you to expand on some of your opening remarks, is like from your perspective and the National Farmers Union perspective, what do we need to shift systematically to create resiliency and flexibility in our food system that will mitigate us having to put out these fires or react all the time to these events, which we know are going to be part of a pattern in future years?
Thank you. Absolutely, we need to see systemic change, more holistic management of the supply chain as a whole. We have in the past proposed a Canadian Farm Resilience Agency that will be able to provide assistance to farmers in terms of education, cover cropping. We're currently facing a fertilizer crisis right now as one of our big supply chain issues, and farmers are needing to find low-cost alternatives that are more environmentally friendly, that are going to still fit their needs. A lot of farmers just got notice this past week that Bayer has declared force majeure for one of its most popular pesticide products. And, farmers are scrambling to figure out how they're going to implement their production for this year. And so we really do need to find ways for farmers to be less dependent on these inputs that are subject to something breaks at a factory overseas and all of a sudden we're scrambling and are anticipating yields going down and costs going up again. So we really do think that systemic changes on the level of a Canadian Farm Resilience Agency, more holistic views of the whole supply chain are absolutely in order.
Yeah. So measures that seem to, of course, increase resiliency, but also positively impact a farmer's bottom line because of the cost of inputs and so on. Also, as you may recall, in the last Parliament, our study, our committee looked at processing capacity in Canada. And I really appreciate your remarks about, JBS and Cargill and their absolute dominance of the Canadian market. And quite incredible, though, the shift in a few short decades of how the free market has really centralized to really just complete control by just two players. And so I'd like just for you to expand a little bit more on that, because processing capacity and supply chains are intricately linked. And so if you could maybe take some time to expand on what you would like to see our committee recommend vis-a-vis the federal government on how we ensure that, smaller communities have better access to processing capacity and therefore increased resiliency.
Well, I think that there needs to be a program of support to open new small abattoirs across the country. And I think one way to ensure that those maintain competitiveness going forward is to look at something like we have for grain transportation, where we have a maximum revenue entitlement on grain transportation on the rail companies, because otherwise, you take away all of the options. And for example, myself, I was at my local abattoir just in October picking up some pork, and they were already taking calls for pigs to be brought in October of this fall. So that was months before the piglets would even be conceived. And that's, just one small part of Eastern Ontario. The shortage is far worse for cattle because all of the knock-on effects from the federal slaughter system have flowed into the provincial abattoirs, and there's just not enough space, and people are losing orders. They are deciding to just not kill as many animals that year, reducing herd sizes. It's going to create really big problems long term.
Yeah, no, I can personally verify that with our local provincial abattoir. Just you have to book in early. It's an absolute must. Just maybe closing with the CPMA, the Agri-Food Innovation Council, they've provided us with a brief and testimony just recommending more research and innovation in the fruit and vegetable cultivation, like vertical farming, et cetera. I know I only have 30 seconds for you to answer, but if you just wanted to add something to that, Mr. Lemaire.
It's an opportunity. We have to look at every opportunity available to us. But we also have to look at our existing infrastructure and reinforcing and ensuring that it's able to meet market demand. So it's an opportunity, but we have to look at what we have in our hand or a bird in the hand as opposed to in the bush in some ways.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll end there, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Thank you, Mr. Lemaire. We're going to go to Monsieur Lehoux maintenant pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. This question, first of all, is for Ms. Lefebvre. You mentioned a number of situations in which you have very complex issues, whether it's cost of fertilizer and shipping. And with regard to the labor force, we heard initially Mr. Millet spoke about the fact that there's an agreement with the Minister Bibeau, and there were some discussions that have to be held with Mr. Fraser and Ms. Qualtrough. Is there anyone who has given some thought to our having a joint committee in order to bring together those three departments? Because it seems to be a particular problem of communication in order to get these files to move through more quickly, because when we look at the issue, the IEMT, the whole issue of rating, I understand that I have some producers in my region who have asked how come this was brought in for COVID, but we understand that it didn't help. It actually caused harm to the market garden producers. So how do you see that situation in terms of the rating? And with these three departments, I'm a bit tired of hearing that they're passing the ball around from one to the other, and maybe they could all sit down. What do producers think, Ms. Lefebvre? Nothing could be better than a committee being created between the three departments. We've done the same thing on our side. We created a committee, the UPA, and ourselves, the Quebec Produce Growers Association, to really deal with foreign workers-related issues. We speak with one voice, and we would like to be listened to by all three at the same time. How are things progressing right now? Is it progressing, or because I'd like to know? As a matter of fact, for the committee, we'd like to make some recommendations along those lines, because it's not the first time we've heard about that situation and that issue of relations and coordination between the departments. It seems to be a lack of coordination. Who should take the leadership role, and what can you do in that regard as an association? Patrice, would you like to add something? Yes, Mr. Lehoux. We were in a crisis situation in November, and there was a tripartite committee in which we were involved, and it worked very well. So the point is to make that committee permanent so that everything can be coordinated together by everyone. Does that seem to be moving forward to get it coordinated? Is that committee going to become more permanent so that we can have this type of coordination? I think it's essential if we want to move forward more quickly for the immigration of foreign workers. When there's an emergency situation so far, so it should become permanent. So I think it was you, Ms. Lefebvre, who raised the fact that the qualification of businesses to have a longer-lasting recognition when they have a very good file or a record, and you have foreign workers that have to apply each year, and it's the same workers coming back year after year. How is that advancing on that issue through your association in connection with the department per se? Do they seem to want to move forward and set that up? A permit that could last longer when you have a grower that is recognized and is handling the workers, treating the workers well? Well, we would like... the interpreter, sorry, but there was a brief interruption for technical reasons. It's our solution that we're... once again, the interpreter, sorry, the comment was inaudible. I imagine, Ms. Lefebvre, that you would be very pleased to see in the committee's report a recommendation that's very specific and to have answers quickly so that we can set up that solution, because it should be solved and remove the congestion that exists in that issue, and every year you have to go through the application process over and over again. Would you be in favor of having some action by the government departments, better coordinating things and recognizing that aspect? Definitely, yes. And as far as you're concerned, this rating, has it worked well in some areas? I understand that this spring there seems to be some concern for the spring of 2022 in that area. I've seen producers lose workers. I'm very sorry, Mr. Lehoux. Mr. Lehoux, I'm very sorry. The 5 minutes are finished. My apologies. Now, Ms. Valdez, 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, colleagues, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses who are here to share their perspective on the matters at hand. I, too, have questions related to resiliency. So this question is for the Quebec Produce Growers Association. As you know, farming operations need to really embrace innovation so they can remain competitive. Can you describe what innovations have been leveraged during these times to assist with supply chain?
Patrick.
Non, je te laisse y aller, Catherine.
Nous avons un fonds d'innovation maraîcher là.
We have a growers innovation fund that's being set up, and it will only be used for research for vegetables. So right now we're limited in what we can offer our members, but eventually that project will change the situation.
Thank you for answering that. Is there any other witnesses that wanted to answer that question? Okay, so I'll move on to my next. This is open to all witnesses, but I'm curious to hear what type of business risk management tools your organizations or members within your organization have adopted to become more resilient.
I would be happy to respond. I know that when the committee did a study just back at the beginning of the pandemic on agri-stability, we were quite quite enthusiastic about the possibility of removing the reference margin and making the program much more valuable to farmers. I think we've seen over the past year with just the absolute upheaval with weather affecting production, from northern Ontario and everywhere west, that agri-stability and agri-recovery have been absolutely key for farmers to be able to just to maintain a toehold, frankly. And without them, I think that the situation on our farms and our ranches would be orders of magnitude worse. And I think that we need to do everything we can to maintain, access to those programs for farmers and improve access.
Thank you, Mrs. Ward. Anyone else want to comment on the BRM tools?
Perhaps I could go back to your question on innovation quickly, if that would be all right.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
I just want to note one of the comments that we've seen throughout our industry is just the strain on the market, and part of the challenge is lack of investment on innovation because of the challenges around the pandemic. So that is part of the issue that we're dealing with, is not a lack of interest, but everyone within the supply chain, from growers right through to retail, are looking at that complexity of labor, as we heard through testimony, the complexity of all the attributes that are causing challenges getting product to the consumer. So the innovation side is secondary in some ways. It's just a matter of, especially for a fruit and vegetable world where you sell it or smell it, they are just wanting to get the product off the farm into the truck if they have a truck, across the border at this point, because we aren't in full production. But if greenhouse is there, likewise, and then into a warehouse. And in some cases in the warehouse, not having enough labor then to get it into the store, and then not having enough labor in the store to get it on the shelf to the consumer. So all those pieces come into play. And I'll just note, you didn't have an opportunity to talk to just the increase in costs. So from our sector, operations like Guy have seen 16% minimum of increase in cost. So the 5% food inflation number we heard in January, we can expect those numbers from the fresh fruit and veg perspective to be much higher coming down the pipe.
I think did Guy want to?
Si je peux me permettre de faire.
If I may make an answer on risk management, we would really like to, I agree with what Ms. Ward said concerning the agri-stability program, that most of the provinces should join in order to make changes. When I hear about 100% for the increasing of the margins of agri-stability, there is something that is not being understood there. There are only 2 or 3 provinces that don't want to follow suit. So the problem is a glaring one in all the other provinces. So we need to find some way to consolidate the responses and to move forward in that process. This is a program that ought to be adapted to our farms. Thank you, Ms. Lefebvre, Ms. Valdez. And now Mr. Parent for 2.5 minutes, please. Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Lefebvre. I would like you to complete your answer on the issue of rating. Well, the rating is something we're now experiencing. We saw that last fall on some farms where the temporary foreign workers were approved. And fortunately, it was near the end of the season, but they went to Montreal to work for some construction companies and all that. And what we're experiencing now is that, unfortunately, there's some raiding occurring also between farms in different specializations, where there's some people that have, some of them have less impact on the business volume in terms of the salary, so they can pay a little higher wage. But this is something that has to be ended, this raiding. It's really a problem. It's things like this in Spain and other ports where we raised this with Ms. Quattro and Ms. Bibot, and we've already sent some correspondence to try to find a solution. So we really need to bring in those solutions as soon as possible before the large numbers of temporary foreign workers arrive in April and May. If it was possible to send that in writing to the committee, then please those solutions, and we would perhaps be able to benefit and include it in the report. I'd like to hear you now on the issue of the supply commissioner which you proposed. Other witnesses have said, well, it's not so sure it would be effective. It might be a structure that would just write reports and have no impact. I'd like to hear you on that. Is that something we should bring in? Yes, we believe so. We would like to see some solutions that are effective, but any other approach, as long as we have concrete results quickly, we won't object to any other ideas, but that is one which we see as an idea that may help out. Wouldn't that be a coordinator rather than a commissioner? I'm not sure of the distinction between the two necessarily. I'll leave it up to you with your knowledge. I'd like to hear Mr. Millet on that briefly, please. In our case, it's quite simple. Of course, having a person appointed by the government who could really be much more involved in not just agriculture, our problems are much greater with the portion for the producers. That's very important, but we have issues that are related to transportation and the different sets of regulations and the provinces. Thank you. Mr. Barron, I'm sorry. The time is up. I'm very sorry. Now, Mr. McGregor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I'll turn to the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. When we had the Agri-Innovation Council before our committee, there was a little bit of a back and forth with them regarding, real-time, real-time looking at people's supply chains when they might be impacted by something unexpected. So, for example, when the Port of Vancouver was cut off by flooding, and of course, most recently when 3 of our major border crossings were blockaded by illegal blockades. Maybe can you talk to me a little bit about, how do businesses in your sector, are some of them starting to incorporate technology that allows them to get real-time updates on supply chain problems? And, does the government of Canada need to do more to invest in this type of technology so that possibly shipments can be rerouted, using artificial intelligence? Do you have anything you can contribute to that conversation?
Real quick, vraiment rapidement, je peux vous dire que quand on...
Just briefly, when we talk with truckers, we have some flexibility where they can change their routes fairly easily. The impact of the closing of the Ambassador Bridge were felt immediately. It caused delays for us. Trucks were stuck in long lineups, so the trucks can easily move around. But when we talk about containers, if we want to change the route of a container, that is a process that is very complicated, that can often take a week or two, and often it's the delay that we are going to see if we keep the same transportation route. So there are already some tools that shipping companies provide us. We're in a period it's a very modern period, and there are a lot of tools available. I don't think that what we're looking for is to have tools to, when we talk about flexibility in transportation, the tools that we're looking for have more to do with rules and finding tools to find some way to have truckers so that, it's the new generation. They're not interested in being truck drivers. Fewer and fewer truck drivers are around. It's the processes, I think. We need to make the jobs more attractive. Being a worker on a farm, or a worker in a warehouse, or a worker in a truck, these are jobs that no longer have the same attractiveness, and we need to find some way at any cost to have people benefit and additional people join those jobs. Thank you, Mr. Millet and Mr. McGregor. And on behalf of the committee and all the members, thank you very much for being here before the committee this morning, and for your testimony, and for your work in the industry. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
We'll be back shortly, so please don't go far. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
By video conference is from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Robin Guy, who serves as the Senior Director of Transportation, Infrastructure and Regulatory Policy, and Jared Cohen, who is a Policy Advisor. So welcome to you. From Pulse Canada, we have Greg Northey, who serves as the Vice President of Corporate Affairs. And from the Retail Council of Canada, we have Jason McLinton, who is the Vice President of the Grocery Division and Regulatory Affairs. Welcome to all our witnesses. As you know, you have 5 minutes for opening remarks, and we're going to start with Mr. Guy. So you have the floor. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, honorable members. It's a pleasure to be appearing at this committee for the first time. My name is Robin Guy. I'm the Senior Director of Transportation, Infrastructure and Regulatory Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Jared Cohen, Policy Advisor. I recognize that it may seem out of the norm for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to appear at this committee, but as the country's largest industry association with members in all sectors, we have a deep stake in the success of the agriculture and agri-foods industry. Our membership includes companies and associations at various points of the agriculture supply chain, including producers, processors, retailers, and ancillary business. Over the last number of months, the Canadian Chamber has been running Canada Food Link campaign that has been seeking to draw visibility towards a number of priorities for the industry, such as regulatory competitiveness, trade, and innovation. As such, the committee's study is both a welcome and timely. Before discussing a few specific priorities for the committee's consideration, it's worth noting the volume of papers littering the town talking about the sector's potential. This includes the Advisory Council on Economic Growth, the Economic Strategy Table on Agri-Foods, the Industry Strategy Council, and the Guelph Statement. Although the sector has remained resilient in the face of a disruptive 2 years, I mention these reports not for posterity purposes, but instead to underscore that it's important to ensure we take the voluminous work that has been produced and put it into action. I hope this committee can catalyze on that action. In the time available, allow me to focus on a few points in the areas the committee has identified as points of interest. First is regulatory. While oftentimes the cost of input fluctuations are due to market forces, the regulatory burden imposes a significant cost on companies, and it's a cost that is within our control. Diverging from regulatory best practice and science-based international standards raises the cost of business. It makes Canadian companies less competitive, and it prevents small business owners from running their companies. Too often, regulators do not give sufficient consideration to economic and business impacts when making decisions. To remain competitive, this cannot be the case. We would urge the government to adopt an economic and competitive lens mandate for regulators to ensure that it does not hinder growth for Canadian business. As Canadian business turns to recovery, I would also stress that now is simply not the right time to introduce new regulations that would hurt economic growth. and add new strains to our supply chain. Second is transportation corridors. Extreme weather events and aging infrastructure remain challenges to ensure we can get products to buyers and to markets. We have a serious infrastructure deficit in Canada, which will require us to perform triage. It's essential that we avoid the temptation to spread whatever money is available like peanut butter across Canada. Infrastructure capacity takes time to build, and we need to move now to reap benefits later. We cannot simply address existing gaps, but must look to our future needs to reach our potentials. This forward vision is essential to ensuring our transportation system can meet the future needs of our economy. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce commends the government for its investments through the National Trade Corridors Funds. Through this program, we must continue to look at building redundancy through tools such as twinning of rail in high congestion area, increase the capacity of our bridges, and protecting industrial lands around airports and ports. I would also stress that the investments must be based on clear priorities with measurable economic returns. These priorities must be clearly communicated by government so private sector can act accordingly. And these priorities must be backed by data to ensure we can see the impact projects are having to strengthen our trade corridors. I would also like to commend the government for launching the Supply Chain Summit. Partnership and dialogue between government and the private sector are critical to work through these complexities. Establishing supply chain work groups for information sharing and moving issues forward cannot be overlooked. These are not flash in a pan issues that will be solved overnight. Third and lastly is supporting supply chains through innovation. The success of Canadian agriculture sector relies on our ability to adopt new technologies which will support the sustainable economic growth of the agriculture and agri-food sector. The long-term viability of the industry relies also on innovation to enabling tackling climate change. The government needs to work closely with industry to develop a technology-neutral net zero transition plan, such as the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Program and support for carbon capture, usage, storage for the upcoming federal budget. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Guy. We're going to now move quickly to Mr. Northey for 5 minutes. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to committee members. As mentioned, my name is Greg Northey. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Pulse Canada. Pulse Canada is the national association representing growers, traders, and processors of Canadian pulses, which include peas, lentils, beans, faba beans, and chickpeas. We are proud to be leading the future of healthy, sustainable food through the growth of Canada's pulse industry. As the world's largest exporter of pulses, shipping to over 130 countries, our industry's growth is directly related to our ability to meet global customer demand. And for that, we need a reliable, functioning supply chain. Unfortunately, our sector is currently facing historically poor rail performance. And in addition, for the past 2 years, we have experienced considerable disruption to service in the Canadian container shipping market. Roughly 40% of pulses are exported via shipping container, which means the current container disruptions we are seeing are severely impacting our industry's ability to participate in international trade. I want to be very clear on what these disruptions have meant for pulse growers and exporters. Shipping lines have removed historic routes to the Indian subcontinent, South America, and other destinations that our trade traditionally relies on. As a result, average transit times for our containers of pulses have gone from between 20 to 40 days to reach destination to now 70 to 90 days, depending on the destination. We've experienced record low schedule reliability through vessel delays and blank sailings. An estimated 90% of pulse exports were either rolled to a later vessel sailing or missed shipment altogether in 2021. Some containers of pulses have sat at port for up to 6 months waiting to get on a vessel. In addition, export shipping capacity has effectively been cut by half for Canada by the decision of container shipping lines to ship empty containers back to Asia instead of fully laden containers filled with Canadian exports. As a result, our industry has experienced lost sales and canceled sales contracts, which has impacted our competitiveness in international trade markets. This has been exacerbated by record high freight rates and additional supply chain costs. For example, the cost to retain a single shipping container for use for export increased from $1,300 to $1,800 per container in 2020 to $4,000 to $5,000 in 2021. At the same time as these excessive freight increases in poor service, it is notable that container shipping the shipping lines, profitability has hit record levels. It is predicted that collective carrier profits for 2021 are to be in the region of $120 to $190 billion. This is a record for them. There is no doubt that a good portion of these profits have been extracted from the pockets of farmers, exporters, and Canadian consumers. This is why Pulse Canada helped found a cross-commodity initiative beyond agriculture called containercrunch.ca that is calling on the federal government to act to fix the container crunch and fix the issues facing the containerized supply chain. We are here today to advocate for two things. One, the government immediately open an investigation under Section 49 of the Canada Transportation Act to investigate what is contributing to the current container disruptions and to better inform the legislative and regulatory changes required to address the competitive failures in the container shipping industry. We do have a real need to update our legislative system regarding their governance of shipping lines. The second piece is we are asking the government name a supply chain commissioner to lead the recently announced industry government task force to bring together stakeholders to identify immediate solutions to address supply chain disruptions specific to containerized shipping. These two actions are critical next steps to help ensure we identify immediate solutions to the disruptions, but will also help ensure that we are able to move to a new, more desirable state with improved operating levels and financial performance for all who are using the containerized supply chain. When given a level playing field, Canada's pulse industry can compete in any market around the world. If we are to increase the production and export of sustainably grown nutritious pulse crops, our industry needs access to a well-functioning, resilient supply chain. The committee has an important role to play in helping draw needed attention to this issue and providing recommendations that will end the harm this issue is having on Canadian businesses and consumers. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Northey. We're going to now move to Mr. McClinton for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members that have offered for me to come and discuss the supply chain for the agriculture and agri-food sector. First of all, I would like to give you a brief presentation of the Canadian Retail Council of Canada, RCC. Retail is the largest sector. More than 2 million Canadians work in our industry and is known as being retailers in Canada. The RCC represents 45,000 businesses of all kinds, from large stores to specialized shops to discount stores to independent stores, online shopping companies, and what interests us today, food retailers. Food retailers that are members of the RCC are proud and are an integral part of the Canadian retail system, or food system. They are a key stakeholder in direct relationship with consumers that provide Canadians with a wide variety of foods that they consume on a day-to-day basis. The 2019 pandemic caused an unprecedented problem for the Canadian food supply system. The RCC and its members worked in close collaboration with processors and members and importers throughout this crisis in order to adapt to this and the behavior and the demands of consumers. We recognize and support the work that the Government of Canada has accomplished thus far, but we need to do more in order to make sure that Canada is well placed to face the challenges that will occur in the mid to long term in the supply chain of food following the pandemic of COVID-19. I would like to mention that our members have already expressed deep concerns about the challenges represented right now for the supply chain and shortages caused by the pandemic, which hugely affect the availability and costs of food products that we find on the retail shelves.
International container availability and cost, extreme weather events such as the flooding in British Columbia, rising fuel and transportation costs, the availability and cost of labor, and rising costs that suppliers are charging for goods. These challenges have been severely exacerbated by border crossing blockades, and this at a time when Canada is particularly dependent on fruit and vegetables from outside the country, impacting their perishability and further compounding the issue of availability and price. RCC is respectfully calling on the federal government to help stabilize supply chains and lower inflationary pressures in 3 key areas. First, as significant progress has been made towards removing existing blockades, RCC is asking the federal government to work together with all levels of government to swiftly develop proactive solutions for each unique crossing, point of entry, land, air, and rail, and critical supply line in Canada to prevent future disruptions elsewhere in the country in the days and weeks ahead. Second, we ask the government to delay the implementation of any discretionary regulations so that retailers can focus resources on ensuring the stability and reliance of their supply chains. While RCC members are supportive of the intent behind such proposed regulations as front of pack nutrition labeling and reformulating labels for natural health products, every new regulatory consultation and requirement requires a shift in focus and adds additional costs at a very sensitive and fragile time. And finally, the federal government can help ease inflationary pressures in areas where it has direct control. This includes quota under Canada's new free trade agreements at the retail level, allocating quota, which is the level closest to Canadian consumers, if Canadian families are to see some of the benefits of free trade agreements in the forms of savings and choice. Quota is currently being allocated by Canada to processors. This adds an unnecessary layer, added cost, and essentially gives all the quota to those who compete with the very products that would be imported. This also includes conducting a review of the process for setting dairy prices in Canada. The Canadian Dairy Commission's current process does not include in any meaningful way the views of grocery and restaurant retail industries, along with those of consumers, and instead relies on self-reported and unverified data. We ask the federal government to improve this process based on the need for greater representation, transparency, and authentication. Ça me ferait plaisir de maintenant répondre à vos questions.
Now I'll be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. McClinton. And just before the questions, welcome Mr. Boulris for your presence on the Agriculture Committee. Welcome. And now I think Mr. Barlow for 6 minutes, please.
And thank you very much for our witnesses for some great information. Mr. Northey, I'm going to start with you, and you brought up a couple of the what I think are pretty critical issues that we have been trying to raise for some time. In fact, wrote a letter to some of the ministers several weeks ago at this point. But you had mentioned in one of the points that you're asking of this committee and certainly asking of this government to initiate that investigation under Section 49 of the Canada Transportation Act to address some of the supply chain disruptions, be proactive that we can address some of these things in the future. Now, I'm assuming from your points that hasn't happened yet. What has been the reason or the explanation from the government why that step has not been taken, considering it's been many weeks since it has been raised as an option?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's we initially raised this about a year ago, and it was in response to what we're seeing, particularly in the U.S., but other countries where, at the highest level, and certainly in the U.S., the current administration at the presidential level has raised containerized supply chain issues as one of the key drivers for economic growth and for risks to their economy. One of the things that we felt Section 49 would do, if launched, would be to raise a profile of the issue, where we believe it is, an incredibly important issue, not just for us, but for many people in the supply chain. And an investigation would similar to what other countries have done. Regulators have looked at the issue, assessed it, collected data, evidence, and they've mapped a path forward. So we haven't seen that happen in Canada. We haven't seen the Section 49 investigation. Obviously, there's potential either to do that or to now. We'd like to see it launched as quickly as possible.
I don't want to cut you off. We have limited time. Has the government, the Minister of Transportation, Transport Canada, anybody given you a reason or an explanation why that hasn't happened?
No, we haven't received any reason for why it hasn't happened.
Okay. Another issue you brought up was the possibility of a trade commissioner. The United States, more than a year ago, maybe up to 2 years ago now, when this was first started to see this, and you probably were raising Section 49, appointed a trade czar, a supply chain czar, and implemented some very heavy fines to the shipping companies specifically if they were not playing fair with shipping containers, for example. Have you seen that have an impact on, has the shipping issue been more intense or more acute in Canada compared to the United States as a result of the steps that the United States took compared to we have not done a similar action?
So we have seen improvements in the U.S. Obviously, their supply chains are equally problematic, and we hear about issues at port. But one of the things that has happened is that the shipping lines have recognized that they're being under scrutiny, both by the agency and their Mr. Porcari down in the U.S., who was appointed for that to that position. What we've actually seen in Canada, in fact, is that if we're looking to receive containers to go through, say, Montreal, the priority is given to U.S. shippers to utilize containers through our Canadian ports in the U.S. So they have more ready access to export containers. And I think part of the reason why that is because there is so much more scrutiny on the shipping lines in the U.S.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to shift to the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I just wanted to comment to that. As a result of the United States having the shipping czar and now Canada not being able to get our products to market, we're seeing shipping lanes being diverted from Canada to pick up products in the United States because we are losing our reputation as a trusted trading partner. And this is not a new issue. This is certainly something that's been going on. But to Mr. Guy, I know in the fall, or when it was announced that there would be the vaccination mandates on international truckers, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce strongly encouraged the government to delay that decision. Of course, it did not, and we've seen a result of that. Has the Chamber or any of your members provided the government with any scientific evidence or data that would show that the trucking mandate was not necessary? This was not a step that needed to be taken?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. We have a truck driver shortage in the country, and I think that's something that we found out through conversations with our members. Adding new stresses have the possibility to create problems with the supply chain. So with the rules implemented in Canada and the United States, we're focused on increasing awareness. In terms of the specific data, I think some of our members did share data. Yes.
Have you had any consultation or insights with the government in terms of potential of interprovincial trucking mandates we now hear are a possibility?
No, I think most of our conversation right now at this point is just focused on aggressive public health information and ensuring that vaccine efficiency is understood.
Mr. Guy, has there been a negative economic impact on your members as a result of the trucking mandate, and what would be the impact on an interprovincial trucking mandate if that were to be implemented?
I think we have a truck driver shortage in the country right now. I think that's going to be something that continues to be an issue. Again, right now, I think we're focused on focusing on that increasing awareness of the rules that are in place right now.
Have your members given you any data? And I guess my point here is, we have a very fragile supply chain as it is, and when you add these obstacles or burdens upon it, it's certainly going to be damaging.
Mr. Barlow, I apologize. We're at 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Guy, for your testimony as well. Mr. Turnbull for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. Appreciate your testimony and your time. So I'm going to focus on the Retail Council of Canada first, and Mr. McClinton, I have a couple of questions for you. So I think, unfortunately, we've heard a narrative for the past few weeks that mostly from the opposition party members or some of the members there, that the grocery store shelves are empty. And this is caused by the federal government's vaccine requirements for cross-border truckers. The Retail Council is quoted in an article published February 16th, saying that the Council's grocery members have reported that 90 to 94% of products that are supposed to be on shelves are actually currently available. There still seems to be individuals in the opposition benches that are pushing this, I would say, dangerous narrative that Canadians are going to go hungry. Can you confirm that the quote from the Council published just yesterday about the high percentage of products still available on Canadian grocery store shelves?
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull, for your question. Grocery retail is a highly resilient industry. There are a number of pressures, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that members are facing. Certainly, the blockades has been a major contributor recently, but there are a number of pressures. So to point to any one of them to say that this is the one thing that is causing the challenges, I think is inaccurate. There's a number of challenges facing the industry. At the best of times, our members are never at a 100% fill rate. It's probably closer to 98% or something like that. And so a couple of weeks ago, we were hearing that the fill rates, depending on where you were in the country, maybe the lowest that we were hearing of was in the lower 80% range. So we're probably at around 90% range. Very resilient industry. What we need to do, what our members need to do, is be able to do their jobs, and that's by having reliable points of entry, and that's by avoiding unnecessary regulation and whatever the government can do to lower inflationary pressures. If these things are in place, then retailers are highly, highly resilient.
Got that, yeah. And I note that Michelle Wessler, I'm sure I'm... Washalishan, that's a hard one to say. The spokesperson for the Retail Council of Canada said recently there is no threat to the overall robustness of the food supply system in Canada. I think it's also important to remember, from my perspective, there's reputable professors from the University of British Columbia, Faculty of Land and Food Systems, James Verkaman, who said recently, if anything, panicking and hoarding might make the shortages last even longer. So I wondered if you think that it's actually kind of irresponsible for people in leadership positions to be, scaring Canadians into potentially panicking and hoarding food and other supplies. Couldn't this exacerbate the challenges that we're already experiencing? Mr.
Well,
McClinton?
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. I guess there's two parts to that question. So in terms of panic buying, that does not help. We saw that early on in the crisis with food. We saw it with other products. I think everybody, heard about toilet paper and things like that. That not only does not help, it wasn't necessary, right? Because grocery retailers are very resilient and have very good relationships with their suppliers, and did whatever they had to do and continue to do that in order to adjust. But I think the real issue here, though, is being able to allow retailers to operate in the environment that they're best at, in order to be able to do their business, and it's by doing all the things that I mentioned. And there are any assistance is helpful. There are many pressures, and so any areas where the government can assist will alleviate some of the pressure on supply chains.
Yeah, and I appreciated your recommendations in your opening remarks. I just wanted to step over to the Chamber of Commerce and talk about the impact of these blockades has had on our supply chain. So they've certainly interrupted the flow of goods across the border. Could you, Mr. Guy, speak to the cost, like the Ambassador Bridge, for example, I'm told has over $300 million worth of goods crossing over the border. Is that correct?
I mean, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, sorry. The blockades have caused serious economic and reputational consequences, and I'd kind of stress the reputational consequence for years ahead. I think that not only was it a strike against the rule of law, but it also undermined Canada's international reputation. Our members, who we're talking to, want to be able to use the critical infrastructure to get their goods to and from market. So,
I wonder if it would be safe to say that the illegal blockades were far more damaging than on supply chains than the cross-border vaccination requirements. What would you say to that, Mr. Guy?
I don't think I'd be in a position to comment on that.
Well, certainly we learned from the Minister of Transportation that there was very little impact on cross-border trucking traffic. No measurable impact is what he's been quoted saying. So I'm just wondering if the vaccine requirements didn't actually change the number of trucks going across the border, then they didn't have a noticeable impact per se.
Désolé, monsieur. I'm very sorry, Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Guy. The 6 minutes is up. No problem. Now, Mr. Parent, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to start by thanking the witnesses for being with us today. We appreciate your availability and your testimony. I'd like to start with Mr. McClinton. Mr. McClinton, we've talked a lot about the labor force in the agricultural sector and foreign workers. In your case, in the retail sector, I know you have a lot of issues with the labor force as well, and foreign workers doesn't really apply. What do you need as a government measure to help you fill your labor needs, just briefly?
Labor has definitely been a challenge from our perspective. So I know that some of our members do make avail of the temporary foreign workers program. So I think some movement in that regard would be helpful. But really, I think what it comes down to is there are a number of pressures on the system right now impacting labor, and not the least of which being that there hasn't been a lot of immigration in Canada. We're in a pandemic, right? I think that there are a number of things I think that could be done. We're looking forward to seeing that, as well as I think that would be the primary thing would be immigration.
If you have any concrete measures for people, I don't know, tax credits for people 65 and over to continue working or things like that, would that help your industry?
To engage in a discussion around that, but I think what would be most helpful would be the recommendations that I mentioned in my opening remarks, so that retailers can do what they do best and go about doing business.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Guy, I'd like to hear you about the labor needs you have. If you had a recommendation or two to make to the committee so that we can include that in your report, what would they be?
Early on, we need to ensure that StatsCan's collecting a robust set of data to enable education quality to make the right choices. I think labor shortages cost an estimated $3 billion in lost sales in 2020. Implementing a trusted employer program for temporary foreign workers to ensure regular users of the program. Government should commit to a timely approval of labor market impact assessments, application for TFWs within 6 to 8 weeks, and make sure a transparent tracking process to confirm timelines are being met, including easy, accessible quarterly reports. Maybe, and if allowed, maybe I'll turn to my colleague Jared to see if he had anything to add on that one.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, not much to add there. As Robin mentioned, time is really of the essence in this case. I mean, as we know, the growing season is starting soon. So thank you, Mr. Pennell, for that. But really the key is transparency and just ensuring that that these labor impact market applications for temporary foreign workers are completed within 6 to 8 weeks. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Northey, I'd like to hear you on labor. You make more use of foreign workers. What would be, if you had one or two recommendations to make specifically for the committee, what would it be?
So on foreign workers, we have no necessarily comment, but I would say just related to our current supply chains, our bigger issue with labor is we're actually having to lay people off because we can't execute trade. Members of our supply chain, whether it's Transloaders Vancouver through to traders, processing plants, right now we can't move product, and so we're having to lay people off. So, obviously everything there's different checks and balances that have to happen, but that with a labor perspective, that's our current problem, and then getting them back if we do manage to get our supply chains working again.
Well, maybe they'll go somewhere else, actually, you're right. But you mentioned in your introduction, Mr. Northey, once again about a supply commissioner. Other witnesses have looked into that, and other witnesses said that a commissioner might not be the solution, having an additional structure that writes reports but has little impact. Could you describe more accurately what that recommendation would be? Wouldn't it be a coordinator or a minister responsible for that? Could you talk about that, please?
Well, I think it would have to be defined by two main things. The first one that we would like to see is having someone with the power, the ability, the overall, given a mandate to bring together members of the supply chain right now to address current issues. So if you take the Vancouver ecosystem right now, multiple players on the containerized supply chain side who are making suboptimal decisions and just create more havoc. So, in the immediate term, someone who can come in and address that would be key. Over the long term, having a position like that, whether it's a commissioner or someone else, the real outcome we need is someone to be able to assess the Canadian situation, and I'll containerized supply chain specifically for us, but for all of them.
Excuse me for cutting you off, but shouldn't it be someone who's publicly accountable, a minister responsible for that, perhaps responsible for coordinating? Please continue.
Yeah, so the U.S. is a good example. The supply chain commissioner there was empowered to bring members of the supply chain together. So obviously there would need to be accountability with that, and the mandate drawn up. So clearly, yes, there needs to be accountability, because making changes like this within a supply chain in the short term, there needs to be heft behind it. So, whether it's deputized from a minister or whether it's a minister himself, the outcome is what we're really after. The mechanics of it, as long as it reaches those outcomes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Northey and Mr. Parent. And I gave you a little extra for the translation, so no problem. Now we have Mr. Boulris for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. The Agriculture Committee, I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being present and talking to us about their reality on these issues, which are crucial for many companies, for your members, for many people. The pandemic and the temporary shutdown of the economy has, of course, disrupted economic activities for everyone, but also it's not simply like a light switch that you can turn back on. It's very complex. There are a lot of subcontractors and people that are involved in many products that are available for our fellow citizens, and the disruption of supply chains are in a large part responsible for the rising inflation. So the increasing cost of living for many people whom we represent as elected officials. So the issues we're discussing today are crucial in many ways. I have a question for Mr. Guy of Pulse Canada, who stated that it takes 20 to 40 days to ship to a destination, and that the disruptions resulted in some shipments now taking 70 to 80 days in order to get to the destination. Could you tell us more, please, about the container crunch project that was mentioned a little earlier in the meeting? What type of partnership with the government is necessary in order for your sector to be able to implement effective measures such as that initiative of a container crunch?
Yeah, so specifically on those numbers, so that is the transit time once a container is on a ship to a destination. So if we take India, for example, which is a major market, previously it would take upwards of 40 days. Now it could take about 90 days. And so that is really down to changes in the cancellation of certain routes that would have gotten there quicker, more transshipment having to happen in other countries. So it just exacerbates that there's a deprioritization generally of our ability to execute to the markets we have, because from the shipping line perspective, they're not as profitable. So, our main piece here is that we need the immediate fixes, as I mentioned, with somebody, the outcome being that we're able to bring together members of the supply chain immediately to address those suboptimal decisions that are being made. But ultimately, from a container supply chain standpoint, our big need is to work within Canada, but with other partners around what is the proper governance structure around shipping lines. So we have a piece of legislation that exempts them from the Competition Act right now, that is over 40 years old, out of date. And so right now we're in a really great position to look at what kind of structure we need to put in place to govern shipping lines. Ultimately, every country is looking at this right now. The U.S. has a bill that's being deliberated specifically on this issue. And we have the opportunity right now to make sure that we're actually doing that correctly.
Do you find that the federal government should take more initiative and show more leadership in this issue from your point of view?
Absolutely. There's an opportunity for the federal government to show leadership. Ultimately acknowledging the problem, recognizing how big of a problem is. I'm talking about the pulse sector, but the container crunch, it represents 12 different organizations across multiple different commodities. It's much bigger than just us. It is a huge issue for the economy. And so taking leadership, acknowledging what needs to happen, addressing it, deciding which tools are necessary to resolve it are key, because ultimately, it's an oligopoly as far as shipping lines. Three alliances control 80% of the global market for container shipping, which is a major problem, and all countries have to wrestle with it. Canada could be a leader in wrestling with that problem.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. I'd like to say with the people from Pulse Canada once again, the recent blockades at the U.S. border caused a great deal of disruption in the agriculture sector, probably billions of dollars in costs. And this planting season is coming soon in a few weeks. It doesn't appear here in Montreal, but anyway, those delays, did they have any impact on essential products such as seed or fertilizer that were held back at the border? What are the effects of those blockades? Were there any effects or perhaps not?
Yeah, it had effects both for exports for us and for imports. So we export through Coots and Emerson to the U.S. The U.S. is a large market for us with dry beans and with dry peas. So getting through that border those borders is essential. So anytime any kind of border is stopped, it's a real problem, because you can't execute, you can't ship, and the process is shut down. So as far as coming north, yeah, anything that's produced as far as inputs in the U.S. that would utilize those borders, whether it's pesticides, fertilizers, seeds, anytime it stops, it creates problems in an already fragile situation, because we're already short on many of those major inputs.
Fine. I'd like to ask Mr. McClinton a question. You mentioned earlier the problems of a shortage of labor. You're not the only ones. It's quite widespread throughout Quebec and Canada. Part of the answer is immigration, and you mentioned that. We agree with that in the NDP. But I'm quite concerned about the delays in processing the immigration files, which over the past 2 years have been slowed down. They haven't been respecting the timelines. Mr. Bourris, I'm very sorry. The 6 minutes is up. But we are now going to, well, you will have 2.5 minutes in the next round of questions. So now it's Mr. Steinley for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the time and appreciate the witnesses that we brought forward today and brought presentations. I would like to go back to the conversation with Mr. Turnbull and Mr. Guy for a second. And I don't think it's panic that some of us have brought up with our constituents. I do have pictures of empty grocery shelves in Regina. It's produce and yogurt and fruit. And I think we can't take that for out of context, because there are some issues. Just because grocery stores in other parts of the country are stocked and have their shelves stocked, it doesn't mean that there are some other issues in people's ridings. And I'd say even if those grocery shelves are stocked, the prices are getting so high that people can't afford the groceries anyway. So just to put a bit of context into what some of our constituents are feeling in other areas of the province. But I would ask Mr. Guy, you talked about the blockades being an issue for the supply chain. And I was wondering if you contacted the Liberal government in 2020 when there was blockades backing up the ports in Vancouver and shipping lanes to take proactive measures back then.
Yes, we did.
Could you tell me what kind of conversations you had and who you had them with? And was it with the transport minister, or did you submit some ideas in writing that you could table at the committee?
I can get back to you. Sorry, I'm getting a feedback from my responses, but I can get back to you with that information.
I would really appreciate that. Is there a timeline you think you can do it this week or early next week?
Yeah, I'll try my best for this week.
Thanks. And then you had in your conversations that regulatory burden raises cost of business. You said that at the start of your presentation, which I agree with completely. Is there some distinct regulatory burdens that you could bring forward to committee as we're talking about supply chain? What would be, I'd say, your top three, and I imagine some trucking regulations would be in there, would be the top three regulatory issues that you see facing having a stronger supply chain across the country?
Yeah, I think regulatory measures can create complexities. I mean, and what I would say is focusing on alignment within Canada, but also within our trading partners in the United States to avoid unpredictable regulatory standards. The Chamber is supportive of adding an economic and competitive mandate to any regulation. I'd say some interesting points. Interprovincial trade barriers are a glaring example of inefficiency and cost regulations. While Canada has the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, many interprovincial barriers still remain.
I don't have much time, but just some of those interprovincial trade barriers. I'm the shadow minister for interprovincial trade barriers. Are there two that you have top of mind? Like most people talk about trucking regulations as being one of the issues within interprovincial trade in our country. So have you heard from your membership what would be one of the easiest things that we could come together and talk about to get rid of, to make it easier for trade to go between provinces? Is there a top one or two you'd have?
I mean, there's 144 specific examples that we can get, so maybe we can connect and chat about what those are. But again, I would just say focusing on the economic and competitive mandate to any new regulation would be key.
Well, I'd like to connect later. Thank you very much for that. And as Saskatchewan is the home of a lot of pulse crops, I'd be remiss if I didn't say hi to Mr. Northey and say thank you very much for your presentation. We are looking at even expanding our value added in pulses in Saskatchewan for the next few years. And I'm wondering, what would you see as some of your members' biggest issues to expanding their businesses, and what would be some of those regulatory burdens that you see that we could work together to eradicate, to make sure that we have our pulse producers being as successful as possible and ensuring that we have more access to markets going forward?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Obviously, Saskatchewan, incredibly important province for pulse production. Right now, from a supply chain standpoint, what we hear from the processors, particularly exporters, who really ultimately drive the demand for these products because they're out seeking international markets. Their big question right now is, why would I expand my production or my facilities or my export programs when I can't get capacity to actually ship them to customers? It's impossible to retain customers, keep customers, defend market positions globally if supply chains don't work. It's been an age-old problem. Right now, it's being exacerbated. As far as the production side and bringing in more, because ultimately processing plants, particularly around protein, pulse proteins, these things that are going into foods for domestic.
Thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off. I wanted to get into the fertilizer
Mr.
emissions,
Steinley,
but we'll
I'm
have to do it
sorry.
next time.
We're at 5 minutes. Thank you. My God, I wish we always had more time in these. Great testimony. Thank you, Mr. Northey. We're going to go to Ms. Taylor Roy now for 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Monsieur le Président, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. I wanted to start with the Chamber of Commerce. You made some comments early on about regulatory burdens and also investment in infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and you mentioned that you wanted to look at measurable economic returns. And again, with regulatory burden, you mentioned economic and competitive mandates. I'm just wondering, your third point was really more about climate, net zero plans, et cetera. How do you bring together the need for climate action and climate events when you're just looking at economic returns in these first two areas and not really factoring in environmental concerns? Because it seems like it's rather broken out into separate silos, if you will.
And I would say investing in transportation infrastructure specifically, I think can still be something that is environmentally friendly. I think it's something that's definitely needed to look at. But I think it's again, it's making sure that we actually have capacity to move cargo. We've heard from different witnesses today of the struggles of that. I think it's important to support redundancy in critical infrastructure, such as the twinning of rail in high congestion areas. It's making sure that if there is a problem going to one area, that there's an opportunity for us to look at other options.
No, absolutely, I agree. And I'm just wondering, though, when you were talking about making the decision as where to put this infrastructure spending so as not to spread it too thin, you mentioned looking at measurable economic returns. I'm wondering, do you look as well at the environmental impacts or what the environmental consequences of some of these investments might be?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's important, but I would say that it can't be necessarily the one and only thing that we look at. I think it's also important that we do look at some of those other in a holistic approach.
Thank you very much. And then I had a question too for the Retail Council of Canada, for Mr. McClinton. You mentioned that retailers were highly resilient and that most of the shelves were still quite full despite the different impacts that we've had to our supply chains. But that labor was really one of the big issues. And I'm wondering, during the pandemic, the frontline workers in retail operations were given an increase in their hourly wage. And despite that, our large retailers still had record profits. I'm wondering, do you think that whether maintaining those higher wages for these essential workers might help to solve the labor shortage that you're experiencing in retail operations?
Thank you for the question. This has been a very, very challenging time for everyone across the supply chain. You know, as we've heard from witnesses today, there have also been record costs associated with the grocery retail sector in Canada. If you think about having to adapt to all of the changing public health measures that have been put in place, they have also been facing and continue to face unprecedented price increases from producers and from suppliers. So while I'm not in a position to comment about any individual member of the Retail Council and how they, their individual business decisions, there are a lot of pressures facing members right now, and they are not immune to the current challenges.
And my last question is actually for the pulse industry, which I happen to be a big fan of as well, being a vegetarian and loving those products. It's really about the shipping, because you did mention that the regulatory burdens are really not your big issue right now, Mr. Northey. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that some of the other countries had looked at these containerized supply chain issues and have mapped a path forward. Given that you said there are three basically alliances that control most of the market, perhaps we could learn from what other countries have, the paths other countries have mapped. And I was wondering if you could share some of those findings and some of the specific things you think we can do to address this global problem.
Yeah, thanks for the question. New Zealand is a great example. So they would have had a similar system as Canada, where they had an act that exempted shipping lines from competition, from their competition legislation. So essentially an exemption, and then the alliances could work together to do certain things. So the focus right now for a country like New Zealand, they've dropped that provision. Now shipping lines are under their normal Competition Act, which creates a whole different dynamic for those shipping lines, where they have to function in a very different way as far as how they provide service.
Thank you, Mr. Northey. Thank you, Ms. Taylor-Roy. Again, wanted to try to let you finish your thought there, and I'm glad we got it on the record. Maintenant, Monsieur Parent pour.
Now, Mr. Parent, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Northey, you talked earlier in your comments about containers being controlled by 3 major companies and that something has to be done about that problem. Concretely, do you have a recommendation to make to the committee in that regard as to how we could assist you?
Yes. So the shipping global container shipping is controlled by three major alliances, which are combinations of companies. So there's about 9 major companies that form up into 3 alliances, which control, like I said, 80 to 90% of the market. For us right now, facing the situation we have in Canada regarding our legislation, and seeing how other countries are approaching it, our recommendation at this point would be to repeal the Shipping Conferences Exemption Act, which is the current legislation that's, like I said, out of date and was meant to exempt shipping lines from the Competition Act. We would advocate that the shipping lines be placed under the Competition Act right now and the Competition Bureau, which would automatically create a different dynamic for them. We would also say that, similar to the U.S., where they've taken a stance that is similar to how we would handle the railways in Canada, where you look at the tremendous market power and you have a regulatory solution to that, where you have an agency, our agency particularly, able to investigate specific instances of service failure. So it's a twin approach where you would look at building something like that into the Canada Transportation Act, which is much more focused on regulatory solutions to market power, plus removing the exemptions to the Competition Act for shipping lines.
Merci. Si vous avez,
Thank you. Do you have anything in writing on that to send to the committee? It seems to be an interesting solution. Thank you very much. Mr. Guy, you talked about investing in innovation on an urgent basis in the industry. In concrete terms, what 1 or 2 measures could the government do to encourage innovation and investment in businesses?
Maybe I'll turn it over to my colleague, actually, Jared, to answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. I'll be very quick. Merci, Monsieur Perron. Really, innovation comes from, you digitize the supply chains. Digitization is a big issue for many farmers and SMEs within the supply chain. So I think that there can be significant innovation. We've seen farmers use rural broadband and universal broadband.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And I'm sorry, Mr. Perrin, but the time is up. So finally, Mr. Boulris, you have 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, listen, I'm going to go back to the question that I had raised in the previous round with Mr. McClinton, because immigration can be an answer to a certain labor shortage, and we agree with that as New Democrats, but there are substantial delays to immigration in Canada. That's been the case for months with the Liberal government, and we've heard horror stories in my riding on all kinds of applications, work visas, temporary workers, permanent residency. The long delays, it can be 12, 18, 24 months of waiting. Does that concern you as an industry or as a company, these delays at Immigration Canada?
Merci, Monsieur Boulris.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Boulris.
Translation in the background, I'm sorry. Anything that would streamline that sort of a process would be helpful, and we'd be pleased to participate in those discussions.
Parfait, merci.
Perfect, thank you. A question for Mr. Robin Guy of the Chamber of Commerce concerning the fact that in Quebec, some 70% of our beef comes from interprovincial businesses. In your opinion, according to your experience, is interprovincial trade in beef subject to regulatory obstacles? And if so, what are they?
I think, and sorry, I'm not an expert on the beef on the interprovincial trade side, so I apologize. I would say again, just making sure that there's the ability to be able to really have that alignment within Canada, I think is a massive aspect to success there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, that will complete my questions for today. Thank you to the witnesses once again and the analysts.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boulris. So now it's time for the second round of questions and the panel. That's all the time. So thank you to our witnesses. for being here this afternoon. Thank you for your testimony and for the work with the industry. And I would also like to recognize our interpreters and the entire team here for their work. And
for your time. We will see you back on March 1st. Have a great day.